Well, thank you, Lightfoot. Appreciate it. Well, thank you for allowing me to be here today. It is truly an honor to represent Montana and our 12 federally recognized tribes as I serve on the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, the Senate Indian Affairs Committee, and the Appropriations Committee. I know I've got at least two of my tribes here today. Where's my Crow tribe? It just said hi to, where's my Crow tribe at? Here we go. Nice. Good to see you all. And CSKT is here as well. Chairman Finley back there, great to see you. Any other Montana tribes here that I might have missed? Great. Well, I'm glad to be here with you today. Let me tell you a little story. I just returned from a trip to Asia. So during the Easter recess, it was a 2-week recess. The first recess, I boarded a plane here in Washington, leading a delegation with 3 other U.S. senators and 2 members of the House, and we flew to Beijing. We had a mission there to get U.S. beef into the China market. Now, I know we're here to talk about energy, but be patient. You're going to find the relevance of this story in a moment. Do you realize China has banned U.S. beef imports for 13 years? We're getting very close to them removing that ban. It's the second largest beef import market in the world. And just by a show of hands, anybody here involved in cow-calf operation, the beef industry? There's a few. But here is why we went over there. It's not only to access the China market for U.S. beef, but guess what else we talked about as we met the Premier of China, Premier Li Keqiang. You remember President Trump had a meeting with President Xi Jinping in Mar-a-Lago first week of April. That was Thursday, Friday. On Monday, we were in Beijing. We were meeting with the Premier. It's the second highest position of power in China underneath President Xi Jinping. And the issue of North Korea came up. So as you're seeing what's going on in North Korea, and this is a very real threat to the world, it's a very real threat to the United States, as the North Koreans are moving down a path to put a nuclear warhead on top of an intercontinental ballistic missile that would be capable of striking any target in the continental United States. We cannot let that happen. We were chatting, engaging with the Chinese, and asking for their help, because about 90% of the trade with North Korea occurs with China. 90% of all the trade with North Korea comes through China. And isn't it interesting that a couple of the key levers the Chinese have to move Kim Jong-un away from his nuclear arsenal and to denuclearize North Korea is related to energy. Because they were talking about coal, they were talking about oil. Do you realize between now and the year 2050, in the next 33 years, according to the American Chamber of Commerce, the energy demand in the world is going to increase 84% from where it is today? 84%. And why is that? Well, that's because we're going to add about 1.6 more people to the planet. And energy demand will continue to grow. In fact, as you look at where the most recoverable sources of fossil fuels, natural gas, coal, and oil, if you look at where they reside in the world, do you know which country has more recoverable fuels than any other nation in the world? It's the United States. We're number 1. Do you know who number 2 is? It's Russia. Number 3 is Saudi Arabia. Number 4 is China. And number 5 is Iran. Now think about that list for a moment. When you consider the fact that Europe today, Western Europe, depends on Russia for 40% of their natural gas. Do you think the Europeans would rather have Putin in charge of their future for energy, or perhaps the United States? I visited a coal-fired plant in Tokyo as we were coming back home. Do you realize the Japanese are replacing their nuclear reactors with coal-fired plants after the great Fukushima earthquake in 2011? They decommissioned 54 nuclear plants and are replacing most of that capacity with coal and natural gas-fired plants. And the Japanese studied that for a long time. My point is this. As we go forward, the world is going to continue to need more oil and natural gas. In fact, by all projections, the amount of coal that will be needed by the year 2040 is 15 to 20% greater than it is today. And the numbers are true if you look at oil and natural gas. And so we need to be very smart about how we think strategically about energy going forward here to not create just American energy independence, but we have a chance to create American energy dominance. And the world will be safer and more secure if it looks to the United States for its source of energy and not to countries around the world. Now, I understand you heard from Ryan Zinke. Secretary Zinke is a good friend of mine. I've known Ryan since high school. Believe it or not, we were both Boys State delegates in 1979. He was a Boys State delegate from Whitefish, and I was a Boys State delegate from Boise. We met in Dillon, Montana, 38 years ago. And Ryan went on, he played college football at Oregon, and then he was in the Navy SEALs for 23 years. He was the first SEAL ever elected to U.S. Congress. I'm very proud of Ryan Zinke. He's a good friend. And also, he's the first Montanan to ever serve on a president. Well, I think it's a good change to have Ryan Zinke there. He's a fellow Westerner. He understands our way of life. He also understands Indian country because he grew up in the shadows of Glacier National Park, which is very close to the Blackfeet Reservation and the CSKT. But as we think about energy going forward, truly we need an all-of-the-above energy portfolio. And I'm pleased to see the Trump administration, I think, is restoring balance to that portfolio. We need coal. We need oil. We need natural gas. We need hydropower. By the way, do you realize that it was just the last year or so that we changed the definition of hydropower back to being a renewable source of energy? Talk about political incorrectness in this town. They called hydropower was not classified as a renewable source of energy. Well, I'm a kid from Montana. I'll see it snow in the wintertime, and those waters melt into our reservoirs, into our hydropower generating units. I can tell you what, that's called renewable energy, and it should be. Hydropower is very important. In fact, it's our lowest cost, most reliable source of energy in this country. But then we also have tremendous potential with. In my home state of Montana, when you have a state that has the Rocky Mountain front, it creates tremendous wind potential. We have solar potential in this country and in my home state. We call it Big Sky Country for a reason. The sun shines a lot. We have solar capability. We have biomass capacity. So a balanced energy portfolio is, I think, what we need in this country. Let's not overinvest in any one or the other. Let's have a balance, and we're seeing that around the world. The Japanese, after they saw what happened with that Fukushima quake in 2011, they realized they had too many eggs in one basket, the nuclear basket. And so they're diversifying now with coal and natural gas. Do you realize there are 2,200 coal-fired plants either being constructed or on the drawing board as we speak at the moment? 2/3 of those are going to be in China and India. There's a tremendous opportunity for our tribes to supply that coal the world. I'm also pleased to have Rick Perry, the former governor of Texas, as our new Secretary of Energy. I think he'll bring that balanced approach. He saw that in Texas. He saw that all-of-the-above energy portfolio in Texas. That don't put your eggs in any one basket, keep them spread. And you see that with Secretary Perry. You know, there's a lot of differences between in Texas. For starters, Montana Cowboys are real. They're not just a football team. If there's any Texans there, I hope I offended you, actually. So anyway. Oh, sorry. I know it's a big state, although, you know, when you go to Alaska, it's funny, the Alaskans and the Texans kind of debate back and forth, right? And I remember when Dan Sullivan, the senator from Alaska, he came down to one of our meetings and was chatting with Ted Cruz and John Cornyn, the two senators from Texas, and he brings us 2 T-shirts from Alaska. The first one said, and he gave it to John Cornyn, if you cut Alaska in 2, Texas would be the 3rd. The other one, he has a great big map of Alaska to scale, and inside of it is Texas superimposed, and it says, "Isn't Texas cute?" So it's a It's a big state. Anyway, I find my Texans need a little humility occasionally. It's my job to deliver that here this morning to you. But look what's going on with Secretary Perry. He understands that coal keeps the lights on. Now, when I was told the story about the energy summit that we had in Montana a year ago in April in Billings, we were wrapping up the summit. We had about this many people in the room. It was Zoom like this. We had a table, and I was moderating a discussion. We had tribal members there. In fact, at that time, the chairman of the Crow tribe, Darren Oldcoyote, was one of our panelists. And we had members from the union as well talking about the impact of energy and jobs. We were about wrapped up with the panel. I was standing right where I'm standing here, in fact, with the panelists over here, and some protesters broke in the back of the room. They had great big signs, and they said, "Keep it in the ground." Now, the Crow tribe is sitting on tremendous coal that will be key to their economy, to their people, the revenues they need for those jobs, and to keep the reservation and their people well funded. And so my staff kind of panicked about these protesters, and I just ignored them. I said, let them do what they got to do here. And little Evelyn Oldcoyote, 12 years old, the daughter of the chairman then of the Crow tribe, I saw she walked around the edge of the room, and she walked up to the protesters. And I've known Evelyn now since she was a little girl. I met her first when she was 8 years old. Now she's 12, really good basketball player. And to those protesters, in a quiet voice, she said, "If you keep it in the ground, my people are going to starve." Because the unemployment rate, if we lose those jobs at the Osalaga mine, will go into astronomical levels. 80 to 90% unemployment reservation if we lose those energy jobs. It's a very important issue in Indian country, Montana, particularly in the Crow reservation. Last week, I introduced legislation to permanently extend the Indian coal production tax credit. The Crow tribe has the potential for 10 billion of coal. So I do believe as a country, we need to pursue an all-of-the-above energy approach. My concerns with the past administration is that they weren't keeping a balanced view on energy, particularly as we look at the future of the world and where it's headed, where Europe is headed, where Asia is headed. I'm very pleased to see that Secretary Perry at the Environmental Protection Agency and President Trump signed the Energy Independent Executive Order. And just last week, the D.C. Court of Appeals granted the administration's request to pause a lawsuit, EPA power plan, while they work to repeal the rule. Let me tell you what that rule did to Montana. It was going to be a loss of 7,000 jobs in Montana, $145 million of tax revenues that goes to our schools, our teachers, our infrastructure, a double-digit increase in rates for Montanans, for tribal members, who know that the month is a lot longer than the paycheck can sometimes cover. And I'm proud to see that they put a stop on that as the president is working to repeal that. For what? For what? McCarthy, the former minister of the EPA, came into a hearing, and I asked her, why are we doing the EPA power plan? They ran the regulations through an algorithm that showed that the impact on global temperature was 0.02 degrees centigrade between now and the year 2100 as a result of these regulations. I said, so the impact is zero, it's negligible, but the impact on the people is huge. And we can develop our resources responsibly. We have in the past. We can get better with American innovation and technology to keep working on clean coal technology, because as we lead in that area, follow our leadership. And as environmental stewards of the entire planet, and believe me, if you're a Montanan, you're for clean water, you're for clean air. I spend a lot of time hunting and backpacking, climbing mountains back in my home state. I've yet to meet a Montanan that does not want clean water and clean air. And they also want a good high paying. They want to have tax revenue to support our schools and our teachers so we can keep our kids in our state. They say our three greatest exports in Montana are cattle, that's a good thing, grain, that's a good thing, Third is our kids, because our wages are too low. And energy jobs help develop good, high-paying jobs. And lastly, tying it back to energy and national security. When you have job security and economic security, we can talk about national security. And a world that's dependent upon the United States for energy is a more secure world. Being dependent upon Russia or Saudi Arabia or Iran. The bottom line, though, we need more state and tribal autonomy. Mark Wayne Mullen talked about that. If there's ever a good fight on the issue of sovereignty and autonomy, be one here on energy. Let the tribes develop their natural resources. Let them export their natural resources if they want. Isn't that fundamentally an issue of sovereignty and tribal autonomy? Why should the federal government here be heavy-handed in telling our tribes what they can't do? This is key for the future of our tribes, for their economies. This is key to the future of our American economy. It is true also for our national security and the security of the world, as we are seeing evidence most recently in North Korea. So I look forward to working with the tribes here, working with unions, working with energy producers and others to help grow America jobs, support more made in America, more made in Indian country energy. God bless.
Thank you, sir. God bless you.